What up, savages? Welcome to another episode of the Savage Land. And today on the field, we have G.I. Joe versus Action Force, Part 2, World War II. And basically, we're picking up from the one I did a year and a half ago, War is Good for Business. In this one, I'll basically be stating the different phases of war, the different acts of war that's been going on because these two companies have been going head up. And of course, in the first one, I was saying war is good for business because when two companies go at it, even actually in real life war, when two countries go at it, whoever wins basically acquires the country's wealth, their materials, and basically wins, basically increases on their end, whoever is the winner of the war. Sometimes war is just good for business for people selling items of war, as far as weapons and vehicles and things of that nature. So war sometimes is good for business for certain people, not for the casualties of war. But in this, there's no casualties of war. The casualties of war are the fans, but they're getting good products. So everybody, it's a win-win situation. But in this World War II, there's different factions of war going on, different scenes, different scenarios, and basically I'm gonna just go over that. I will put a slight disclaimer here. I might mention some names, but it's not to disrespect anybody. It's not to come at anybody in any type of way. I'm just basically reporting what I see, just like a war journalist. So if I mention your name or anything like that, it's nothing against you. I'm just reacting off what I see, and that's what I'm gonna report. So hopefully no hard feelings on that end. But basically, let's get into it. The first act is Act 1, Axis versus Ally. And I will say this, I'm not saying anybody's acting like the Axis or the Allies per se, if anybody's a good guy or a bad guy. I'm just labeling this as the act, and I'll tell, and through the act I'll explain why. And in Act 1, the Axis, which is Hasbro, and the reason why I'm labeling that, because like the Axis powers, they acquired countries that were surrounded. They dominated them. They basically took them over. And that's what Hasbro does as a company. They took over Toy Biz, so they got the Marvel Legends. They took over items from Kenner, and they'll absorb a toy company. They'll absorb a franchise. Right now, they absorbed all the Disney franchises. They have Marvel. They have Star Wars. They have absorbed Indiana Jones, Power Rangers, Ghostbusters, etc., etc., Transformers. They pretty much have taken over all these brands and use them for their own personal resources, just like when the Axis powers took over the surrounding countries around them, per se, France. They were working together with Italy, but just all these European countries, once they dominated them, they acquired them, they had use of the people, they had use of their raw materials, they had use of anything, their cows, their women, it didn't matter. You became part of the Axis. So Hasbro is like that, and that's why on that end everybody always says greedy Hasbro, because they just absorb everything they touch, and they take it over and they use it for their own personal benefit, just like the Axis powers. Now, with the Ally being represented by Action Force, aka Valaverse, this is more of the American, the Great Britain, the Australian way, grassroots, representing all that's good in the world. A small company, and like I said, it's all small, like a blue collar feel to it. So in that tip, that's what the supporters of Valaverse, and a lot of people look at that company because it's a small company. They say, hey, poor small company. So they come in on that aspect. Now, shots were fired in the beginning of this war when they went and acquired the license for Sarge, which he can acquire. He has license out with WWE, of course Hasbro for G.I. Joe, and they went and acquired the license for him also. But also they did a great move, which I said in the last war, by going in and getting the Steel Brigade, a mail-off figure that G.I. Joe did back in the 90s, and I guess they let that IP just slip. Now, this was a great move because they had the Steel Brigade name, so G.I. Joe has to label their troops Steel Corps, which they were the original ones with the Steel Brigade. So what a great espionage move, almost like a sneak in, capture, and take out, and that's what they did with the Steel Brigade. Now, throughout this, I will flip-flop on different things, so they're not going to be labeled as Axis, Ally. I was just saying Act 1, two companies engaging, two armies engaging, but almost doing the same thing. Shots being fired, sneaky things being done on each side, but this is war, so it's all out war. Act 2, theaters of war and the players that are in them. And basically, the different theaters of war I'm talking about in this Act 2 is basically like, this war is so big, it has many wars popping off. And mostly from the G.I. Joe side, because just like the Axis, it's a very large army with a very large a faction, like different sections of this army. And what I'm basically talking about is on the G.I. Joe side is content creators going at it, basically surrounded around G.I. Joe and military lines and period, but mostly G.I. Joe. This is a G.I. Joe thing, what I'm stating with Arter Shark versus Viper Island. Shots being constantly fired between those two guys. Iron Can versus Articulated Ninja. That beef that popped off basically over a situation involving military toys. So these different wars are popping off, going alongside with the bigger war between G.I. Joe and Action Force, like these little theaters. And just like in World War II, there were different theaters of war. You had the European front, and then you had the Pacific and South Pacific front. Just two major catastrophic factions of a war going on, and that's what this is almost kind of like. You see the little small stuff popping off, and there's other people who shots fired here and there. The one thing I will say on G.I. Joe side is I've never really seen the unified front. On Valorverse side, their front is very unified. It's a smaller group, but they're more unified. Kind of just like the Allies, really, man. And as far as the Axis, they really not unified, because you got Russia and you had Germany, kind of like two big heads, kind of like bumping heads. They never really got on the same front. They were, but as we all know, Russia turned on Germany, left the Axis, and joined the Ally. So this is that's a kind of a crazy and interesting analogy of that. But that's what I see. I see many wars popping off and going along a bigger war, and that's creating theaters, different venues of war. Also, shots also being fired, missiles being fired. Valor constantly takes shots at Hasbro whenever he can. It comes off as cocky and arrogant, but this is war. You know, you better take shots, especially in a big arena. You gotta take shots. This is war. You in it to win it, not to be friends. I noticed he took a shot at Gridiron Studios doing Joe Fest, man. So he'll take shots at anybody, just not really Hasbro. He feel like you in his way or you in his arena, he's gonna take a shot at you, most definitely. And like I said, sometimes to me it seems a little arrogant or whatnot, but at the same time I don't knock him, man. Take your shots. Also, with the different venues and avenues of war, it's also psychological warfare going on out here. And what do I mean by psychological warfare? Basically, the fandom, Hasbro's nostalgia versus the cult-like following that Valorverse has. And Valorverse definitely has a cult-like following. They down with Valorverse, they down with Valorverse. It's almost kind of a scary thing, man. Like, I'm almost pretty sure, man, he can command some of these guys that's really into Valorverse to do some crazy stuff. But on top of that, Hasbro's G.I. Joe side has strong nostalgia, which I fall under. Now, as far as the nostalgia part, of course, I love G.I. Joe and whatnot, but these great action figures that they put out have really got me to support them and back them. But it's all starting off nostalgia. I wouldn't give a damn. I have no nostalgia connection to Action Force. To be honest with you, I wouldn't even be buying Action Force if it wasn't for G.I. Joe. So it's a very heavy nostalgia tug. Of course, they're putting out great product, but that is the main reason on the G.I. Joe side, versus people who don't have a nostalgia attachment to G.I. Joe and they just really want realistic, good military figures, so they go with Valorverse and they don't understand the emotional attachment to G.I. Joe or why people care or things of that nature. So that's what I call a psychological warfare. That's inside people's head. Like, it's inside my head to, hey, like G.I. Joe because this is what you grew up on, and it is that. But it coincides with also the great figures, the great figure design, because if they suck, I can still like them, but I probably would like them from afar instead of owning them. And then, like I said, with the Action Force, he has such a blue collar, like grassroots, diehard backing, man, that is crazy, man. Sometimes them guys come out kind of wild. So it's also, like I said, it's a different types of theaters of war here. Act 3, cost of war. And basically what cost of war is prices of figures and vehicles. Nothing more plainer than that. Plainer and simpler than that. And when I say with the cost of war with the action figures and vehicles, this is just pretty much straight head up what's going on. And right now, Bobby Valor finds a way to fight with his price shaving that he did. He shaved his figures back to $29.99. G.I. Joe figures started off at $19.99 to $21.99 to a standard main figure is $25.99. Now, I know Valorverse gives you a lot with the hands and the weapons and the accessories, but I always thought $32 was a lot. $29, you're starting to get down to where it's at. But it's still up there though. It's still up there, and maybe you don't want a bunch of hands, or maybe that's maybe that's a little bit too much for you. But I always thought the prices were high on it. As far as G.I. Joe, I think still at $25, I think their price is still good. Now, of course, that just happened. For a long time, I was paying, even earlier this year, maybe in the last year, like those Storm Shadow figures that came into Target, they really still wasn't under the $24.99 SKU. A lot of those figures were $22.99, and for what you get, I think that's awesome for the way the articulation, the sculpt. And it doesn't, you're Hasbro, so you're not gonna have a ton of paint, but G.I. Joe does have his paint where it needs to be at. Like with that line, at least buckles and little things are painted on there. But I thought G.I. Joe still had a good price. And Valorverse, it comes with more, but still, when you're trying to play buck for buck and you really don't care about a bunch of hands and all that, I think $24.99 is still a better price. And it's not like it's lacking with accessories in G.I. Joe. Now, of course, Valorverse guns are better, but that's another act we're going to get into a little bit later on. So I never thought Valorverse price was great. Now, you can split it in half and say, okay, this is an army builder here for $20, which, I mean, there was $22, but he dropped those down just the bare bucks to $19.99. And not get the gear for the extra $10 or whatnot. But who the hell wants to army build a bunch of guys just in their battle garbs? They need their gear. So if you wanted to army build, you still have to pay $32, which not no more. Now it's $29, which is still, you still have to pay $29 for an army build, which with G.I. Joe really just have to wait till it go on clearance and get it for $19.99. I've seen some of the army builders over the past year get dropped down to $15, so that's great. To be honest with you, trying to army build, I've never seen any Valorverse figures get down to $15. That it gets quite expensive when you're paying about $30 to army builders. Like I said, even with the G.I. Joe, when they not getting dropped down on clearance, it's still $25. And now that's just kind of switched over, so I really haven't paid a huge amount for the $25 ones. But when they were $22, like the Alley Vipers and things of that nature, yes, well, actually Alley Viper was $24. Sometimes I would get it for $22, and that's one of the ones I seen drop down to $15, but I already brought mine. But that was good. That was in my wheelhouse, that amount to pay for army builders. So, like I say, you can say that Valorverse comes with all this and that, but it will still be hard to army build just at the price range that it's at, man. Because like I said, if I'm going to army build a soldier, I want the gear to go with it. I just don't want the plain buck body. But he did slice his numbers down, so it makes it a little bit more easier if you want to. I mean, because when you're army building and you save $3 off an army builder, 10 times 3 is $30. You know, so that's huge. Now, far as the situation with the vehicles, now he's starting to win with that, because G.I. Joe vehicles, of course, the his tank is $300. The smaller vehicles, you can get them for, of course, in the 2-packs for $40. Now it's like $50, so you're paying like $25-$30 for a motorcycle. Serpentor's Air Chariot, I would say that was $40, because Serpentor was like, It was like 80, so I would say that's $45. And what else has came out? They just done the motorcycles and stuff so far, but the Trouble Bubble, that 2-pack is 50, so that vehicle was $25. So on the smaller realm, G.I. Joe is still kicking their ass, because Valaverse doesn't have any small vehicles. They have one vehicle so far, and that is that I forgot the name of the truck, the Jeep that they got, and that's $175 to $200. And the helicopter for G.I. Joe is $275. The Dragonfly, and the Hiss is $300. So Valaverse is winning in the bigger vehicle aspect, $125 cheaper per se, or let's just roughly say $100 cheaper, and you still get a big vehicle that fits 6 or 7 people. Now, I'm not going to get in for tick for tack on that, like which one is better, which one I think is better. It's just simply price, and price, it's better out the gate, $100. So it's up to your discretion what vehicle you would want. Would you want a Hiss tank over that I want to say Vamp, but it's not, the Vanguard Jeep that they're coming out with? And I've said it earlier in the previous one, I would take the Hiss all day, but this is not about that. This is about price, and Valaverse won on the bigger scale as far as price. Like I said, $100 cheaper, but on the smaller scale, Hasbro's tearing them up. So it's kind of an even thing, and that's what the whole thing about this war is. It's very tit for tat. It's very give and take. But it starts balancing itself back out. Like, just like how I said, I didn't even think of that until I was just saying it, that they are winning on the bigger vehicle aspect, but they have no smaller vehicles. G.I. Joe, at least it does have motorcycles and have the Trouble Bubble and the Air Chariot, which was an exclusive. But what I'm saying, at least they have something. It's just like it's none as far as Valaverse. So with that, the cost of war is costly, so they pretty much evening out on that, man. They pretty much evening out on that. Act 4, Weapons of War. Now, this is an interesting thing, because once again, it's a tit for tat thing. It's a balanced out thing. Valaverse superior weapons versus G.I. Joe Nerf-like weapons, cartoon, whatever you want to say, fake weapons, and they're bent up. G.I. Joe weapons always come with a bow in it. Valaverse uses a harder plastic, more realistic weapons, and hands down, G.I. Joe cannot go up against Valaverse weapons. There's a lot of Valaverse weapons I put in G.I. Joe's hands. Now, this is only the first part of Weapons of War. What G.I. Joe has to combat that is they have animals. We talk so much about the figures that we have forgot about the animals that G.I. Joe has, like Timber the wolf, which they're probably going to make a junkyard and mutt. So that's going to be a mold, which they're probably going to change up the head and maybe do the fur. But that same aesthetic of as a dog will basically be put into effect with that. Then you have Freedom and Spirit. You have Crocmaster and Fiona with the crocodile. So, and then you have Paulie that's with Shipwreck. But I haven't received that yet, and I don't think that is as much. That's almost kind of like a statue or stand piece that goes to him. It's not really articulated, I believe, like the other animals I just named. But those 3 animals alone, Fiona, Timber, and Freedom, those 3 animals alone are some great award-winning animals. And what better than a bullet that can chase you, like a dog or a bird that can go in the sky? Crocmaster. I mean, so, and Valaverse has I don't even know if they even have plans to ever even do animals. So that is another great aspect. Now, on far as which one tips the scale more, it's the weapons, because the weapons can be utilized by everybody, but the animals can be used with everybody. But there's far more weapons with Valaverse than G.I. Joe has animals. I just named off just 3 animals, when Valaverse has a weapons 10 with hundreds of weapons in it. But those 3 animals hold so much weight, I could actually mention them and put them up as a position piece versus Valaverse superior weapons. So I will not argue and say Valaverse weapons are not better than G.I. Joe. They are superior by far, and it helps them fight. And another tool to help them fight and stay up against a very big army that is Hasbro. Act 5, dedicated leaders versus a committee. So, with Valaverse, they have Bobby Vala, ex-Hasbro employee. He went and started his own company. With Hasbro, you have a committee. you have that panel of Lenny and Emily that comes up there and they talk, but those are just the faces. With Hasbro, they have a committee of investors backing them up, and it's just a whole big company of tiers of people, from CEO on down to those guys, on down to the man who takes the trash out. It's a company that employs a lot of people. Valaverse is also too, but I'm pretty sure it's a very grassroots operation with not a lot of employees on it. So basically their stuff is just getting sent out and getting made, and just people putting in orders and things of that nature. It's not a factory of employees like Hasbro has. But the difference with that is Hasbro has the committee that will back them up financially. It's just a big machine. If G.I. Joe doesn't work out, then they'll dump that, go on to something else. That's what they're there for. That's how it rolls. This is a big company. Versus Valaverse, where it has Bobby Vala, who's a boots on the ground leader, who basically is almost like in a patent in some type of way. He's on the ground with his men. He sees what's going on, and he's doing anything he can to keep his company afloat. Because if this doesn't work, then he probably gonna have to go look for a job at another place like Hasbro, and he doesn't want to do that. So he's fighting tooth and nail to keep his company alive. That's why I say when he does the arrogant shit like throwing shots, things of that nature, he got you. You got to give it all, because if not, he's gonna be out of here. You know what I'm saying? So hey, if that's something to get your people riled up and get your people going, and that's the fuel that's keeping you moving. And I'm not saying that's the only fuel, but like I say, this is all out war. You do what you got to do to survive. And that's a boots on the ground type effect that he had at Joe Fest, when he come in and they all just, it's almost like an army, his own army there, and they see him there. They can touch him, they can feel him, they can see him, they can smell him, and that is very important for the morale of an army. Versus, like I say, G.I. Joe doesn't have a united front, because the committee is just basically there to sell product to you. Basically there on that panel, not to be your friend or make it even feel like you're your friend, but to show you products. Buy, you part of this army, you are. If not, screw you, we don't care. Somebody else will take your place. And basically that is the feel of it. Does it that personally, as me as a G.I. Joe guy, affect me? No, because I don't delve too deep, dig too deep into this stuff. But that is the truth. That is the hard truth. There is no personal connection that you have with the Hasbro team. Rather, I guess with the Valaverse side, they have a personal connection because they have a leader they can touch, they can see, that's there, who actually comes in and listens. So it's a lot for him to bear on him, but he makes himself available to that, and that's huge. I said, as far as your morale of your army. Act 6, a never-ending war. And when I say a never-ending war, as G.I. Joe goes, Valaverse goes. G.I. Joe is the father of Action Force. So whatever G.I. Joe is doing, as you can see in the very many pictures, G.I. Joe's on a snow thing, Valaverse is on a snow thing. G.I. Joe's on a desert thing, Valaverse is on a desert thing. This war is fighting on different fields and different theaters, and it's all fueled off G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe birthed this whole situation. So, and it's really pretty much the same thing. As Valaverse goes, G.I. Joe goes, because now they're making some noise. They're deeper in. They're a year and a half deeper in from when I made my first video. And they're on to new things. So they're showing, hey, look, we're an opponent. You have to notice us. So G.I. Joe does notice them. And I'm pretty sure, that they do things like, hey, he's got this going on. We gotta put this in. Like in March, G.I. Joe did a blitzkrieg. They bombarded, just boom. Valaverse put out those 3 girls. G.I. Joe just put out a shock drop of just new figures, Rock and Roll and Torpedo, Shipwreck, which we all knew were coming, but some new figures we didn't, were just bombarded on some February and March. And that's pretty much G.I. Joe's like, hey, you got an announcement? Well, we got an announcement. And that's pretty much what it has been going on. A tit for tat war. It's look like it's never going to end, because both companies are putting out great product. And this war, just like I said in last, is good for business. This World War II is good for all factions. It's good for content creators, with as far as getting your likes, your views. It's good for material. It's good for the fans because we're getting good product from both machines. Both armies are basically putting out good product because they want to trump each other. They want to beat out each other, and it's just been really, really good. Now, like I said, as far as the war, none of this drama is serious really like that. I still think war is good for business. I think both companies are thriving off the two fan bases just pretty much clashing and mixing matching like me. Like I said, I like both lines. I'm a G.I. Joe guy all day. You can't convince me that Valorverse is better, but I do like both lines. I do dibble dabble in Valorverse, and that's a good thing. I mean, you get my money also. But those are my thoughts and views on what I see in this war, this G.I. Joe versus Action Force. This is the Savage Land. If you can, give me a like, comment, subscribe. We do this for the love and beauty of G.I. Joe and Action Force. Be happy collecting, and may the war wage on. And with that being said, until the next time, God bless.